Welcome to one more Power of Three interview series. Roberto, Monaco here. You, InfluenceOlogy, and an expert together. 3 questions will be answered today. 3 action items that you can use immediate in this call to improve your business. And of course, 3 resources for you to keep learning. It is my honor, my pleasure. I'm so fired up. I'm excited. Can you see the energy today? I have my buddy Joe Sweeney in the call. Joe, how are you doing, my friend?
Oh, muy bien, mi amigo.
Muy bien. Joe
Very
speaks
good.
Spanish too. Now, Joe and I connected 2 years ago. We did some business together, and since then, I became a big fan of this man and his work. Now, there's several reasons, and you notice in this call why you're gonna love Joe, gonna love his work. But there's 3 things that people ask me, Roberto, tell me about Joe Sweeney. 3 things real quick. Number 1, you're one of the biggest givers I know, my friend. Every single time we talk, you always ask, man, how can I help, man? There's anything I can do for you? You always have the psychology of giving, add value. I love that about you, Joe. The second thing is that you have the most unique background. Joe had, at one point, owned 4 different manufacturing companies. He, at one point, hopefully we're going to tell the story today in this call, he opened up a sports marketing agency that I love the story. You're a very successful investment banker, buy and sell businesses. And of course, now you're a New York Times bestselling author and you're a great speaker, great influencer. You combine all these unique talents that you have and you always find a way to make it happen. And the third thing I love about you is this. You're a phenomenal storyteller. So feel free to tell those stories, man, because when you tell the stories, I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome my buddy Joe Sweeney, man. It's a pleasure, man, to be here with you. I love that you're here.
Thank you, Roberto. Thanks for having me with you today.
And I'm going to put a picture of his book here. I recommend everybody to get it. Joe wrote a book, Networking is a Contact Sport. How staying connected and serving others will help you grow your business, expand your influence, InfluenceOlogy influence, or even land your next job. So I appreciate you. How many copies, do you know how many copies have you sold so far, Joe? Thousands and thousands. So when we start talking, working together, Joe's topic, one of the things that he talks about is networking. And I'm like, networking? I had a negative image in my head about networking. So, and I know you're an expert in the country, probably in the world right now, networking. So what is networking, Joe? How do you define networking?
Well, that's funny, Roberto, because you know what? I don't like networking. I have the same negative outlook that you had. But part of the reason, probably the main reason I wrote the book was to get people to reframe what networking is all about. Most of us think networking is where we've got to go get something for ourselves. How do I get 10 new business cards? How do I find a new client? And then we go to a networking event and say, I've got to get, and we walk out and say, you know what, this networking thing doesn't work at all.
That's so true.
The whole purpose of the book is to get people to look at networking as a place we go to give and serve others. And I speak to a lot of sales organizations, and what I tell them, and a lot of people push back at me, is I say, you don't sell anything in this business. What you really do is help people get what they want in life. And a byproduct of doing that is you provide services, goods and services that you believe in that help people get what they want in life. So networking, the real secret of great networking is figure out how you can serve others and help them get what they want. And the tough thing for most of us, it's a mindset shift because it's counterintuitive to what all of us think networking is about.
I remember when I got on one of my first jobs in sales, the owner of the company said, hey man, you gotta go and start networking at Chamber of Commerce, kind of like forcing me into it, right? So networking events. And I didn't have the psychology, I had like a bad association, but I can see if you frame and if you change your mindset, like you said, reframe the meaning to go, to give, that's a really powerful distinction. Now, why do you think in InfluenceOlogy community we have CEOs, managers, salespeople, entrepreneurs, doctors, dentists, chiropractors? Why is that important for anybody to master networking in their business and personal life? Why is that important?
Well, I think it's probably the most important thing in anything you do in business and life, because I'm convinced the quality of your business And really the quality of your life is based on the quality of your relationships. And I think the quality of those relationships are based on how effectively and how deeply you network and connect with others. As we talked earlier, I was just down at Buenos Aires. I gave the keynote for the GE World Leadership Conference, and the whole concept was on leadership.
Okay.
And what I started the talk on, and by the way, for all you listeners, Roberto coached me through my whole speaking career, and but for you, I wouldn't be getting a lot of these speaking engagements. So on a side note, thank you.
Thanks, brother.
But here's the one thing that GE wanted me to talk to their 400 leaders, is about the relationship between networking and being a leader of an organization. And if you look at all the great leaders, I don't care what your political beliefs are, whether it's Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan or Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Jack Welch or Jeffrey Immelt, the two people at GE, the past two presidents, they've all had an uncanny ability to connect deeply with others in a short period of time. And the other reason I think it's so critical for our lives is I think all of us at the end of our lives, if you do what I call a rocking chair test, you sit in your rocking chair, you're in your nursing home, you're 92 years old, you're sitting in your Depends. Most of us will reflect on our life, and what we realize is all we have at the end of our lives are the relationships we've built in those special moments in time that we've shared with people. No one at the end of your life cares how much money you've made or what you've done. It's true. Really about those relationships. And so I think that, people say, why do we do this networking? Why do we connect? Oh, I'm sorry, got to turn my phone off. I apologize. But the real reason we do this, I think, is to really magnify the human experience. And so I think if you can learn to do this, it will give your life so much more meaning and so much more depth. That's why I think it's one of the most important things and why I'm so passionate about talking about it.
I love it. One of the questions that I think people will love it, and I want to understand better, I'll talk about process, because in my sphere, my realm, public speaking, I always tell people, just because you know how to talk doesn't mean that you know how to present. Right? So there's people that listen to me right now that go, oh, I know how to network. I just go in and I give my card, get someone's card and ask, is that all it is? Or there is a clear, defined process for networking effectively?
Right. I talk about a 4-step process. And to be honest with you, I'm almost embarrassed to talk about it because it's so easy. It's 4 steps of asking, listening, then acting, and then believing and receiving that this works. Very simple. And, to me, I sort of compare it to losing weight. Losing weight's really easy. You just exercise more and you eat less. But it's so difficult for people to do. And the networking process is the same way. And I'll just take a few minutes and break down each one. When you go and you ask in that process, you've got to ask with a mindset of giving. You have to ask creatively. You have to ask persistently. You have to ask outside the box. And most importantly, when you're asking people, figure out how do you make asking fun? Because if you can do that, it'll completely transform how you view networking in your whole business. In the book, I talked about the process with Bob Costas and bringing Bob Costas to Milwaukee. I won't bore you with the details, but asking's the first one. And then the second one is listening. Most of us think great networkers are talking all the time. In fact, networking is really about listening. It's figuring out how do you ask good, creative questions, and then standing back and listening. And if you get good at this, it really becomes what we call active listening. And that's where you really find out the needs and wants of your customers. And that's where you really find out how to position yourself in the marketplace.
So ask, listening, step number 2, number 3.
And the third one is acting. I mean, a lot of us ask and we listen, but the number one thing I think that holds back people in business is this thing called fear. And most of us get blocked. Most of us are fear of rejection, and we fear failure. And one of the great books that I've recently read is a book by Wayne Dyer called Excuses Be Gone. And I'd recommend it to all your listeners. But what he does is he talks to about 5,000 people. He comes up with 10,000 excuses, and then he charted them to the most common 18. And, I'm too old, I'm not smart enough, I'm too busy. And what he says, which is most amazing, is not one of them are true. But just the belief that, I'm too busy to network. Yeah. And in my talk, I show people how to overcome the excuse of I'm too busy to network. So the third step is acting. You really have to overcome that. And then the last one is, if you believe in our concept that networking is a place you go to give and not get, what I ask people to do is reflect on this. And the more you give to people, the more it comes back. And I've got numerous stories in the book that really illustrate that. And what I want all the listeners to do is reflect on your own life of when you've really given to someone and you received far more back.
You have so many stories. I don't know. I was going to ask you for the story about when you open up your sports market agency, but I remember also the story about the Starbucks, when you gave the Starbucks the right. Starbucks coffee.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I'll share both stories if there's time. But the number one excuse in networking is people say, "I'm too busy. I don't have any time." Yeah. And if you approach networking the way we do, the way we approach it is, you're networking all the time. And I have a ritual every day, Roberto, and you know this story, where I go into a small grocery store that has a coffee shop, and I always buy coffee for people behind me.
I love this story.
I've done it for years, but since I wrote this book, I've had to dial it up about 7 notches. So now, with coffee, with lunch, with dinner, most people try to find out where I go to dinner or lunch, and they. But the most interesting and moving story about I'm too busy to network is on this one cold December day. I'm in there, bought a cup of coffee, and I looked behind me. There were 3 people with large coffees. Now this is important. Each cup of coffee was $1.60. Yep. And so I threw $5 on the table and ran out because I was in a hurry. I get to the parking lot. Guy turns me around. I have a conversation with the guy. The guy says, "Thanks for the coffee, but why do you do that?" And I said, "I don't know, it kind of makes me feel good, but it really reminds me I've got more than enough." And he says, "I think that's really cool." And he says, "Well, how do people react?" I said, "You know what? Some people cry, some people hug me, some people are mad." And he said, "You ought to write a book about this kind of stuff." I said, "I just did." And so the guy puts his hands out, and he was the chairman of the board of Northwestern Mutual, the largest company of his type in the world. And so we talked for a while. I sent him a book that day. Within 5 days, he wrote a great letter back to me. And within 3 weeks, I had 2 people from his company in my office, and I booked 2 of the largest speaking engagements that I ever have. Wow. And I always say, Roberto, that you do nice things for people, it comes back tenfold. I bought the guy a $1.60 cup of coffee. That returned roughly about 30,000 times fold. But the point of all of this, I didn't buy this guy a cup of coffee so I could land some big speaking gigs. That's not what we did. And if you live a life like this, where you're constantly trying to help people, this thing comes back to you all the time.
I love it, and thanks for sharing that. It's such a powerful story. Now, let's talk about 3 things that the audience can do in terms of 3 specific actions they can do today to implement networking in their business, their lives. What's 3 things they can do?
Okay, well, the first thing, and I talk about this in the book, is I think all of us need a system. Okay. Many of your listeners are entrepreneurs, small businessmen, and you know what? Most of us don't have a boss because we're usually our own boss. Yes. I think the key thing is to create an accountability system to yourself, and I call it my 5-10-15 plan. Okay. And the reason I can talk about this is I do my 5-10-15 plan every day, and it consists of having 5 meetings every day. I know it sounds like a lot, so stay with me. I'll show you how to do it. 10 written correspondence and 15 phone calls. And why the 5-10-15 plan? I got to tell you, it works for me. Now, first of all, Roberto, most of your listeners are going to say, I can't do 5 meetings every day.
Yeah, because they're like, I don't have the time.
I don't have the time. I want all of you to reframe what a meeting is. Most of us think that you and I go to lunch and we talk for 90 minutes about the San Diego Chargers and the San Diego Padres, and we're talking about all these things. And then we spend 5 minutes talking about what it is we're there to meet. Now, I'm not against having long lunches to get to know people, but a meeting, in my definition, or an encounter, is anything that moves your goal or objective forward. Now, all of us have a lot of things we're working on in life, and I try to do is to figure out what are the key agendas that I'm working on, and how can I move the ball forward. And if you look at having a meeting as something that moves the ball forward, I think a lot of us, if we think about it, will have 20 or 30 meetings a day.
Are those meetings you're talking about face-to-face or Skype or any type of meeting?
I'm saying face-to-face.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Roberto, if I wanted to get the financials of your company, maybe what I do is if I see you at the Starbucks and say, hey, Roberto, when are you going to send me those financials? Oh, Jose, I've got to send them to you today. That's a meeting. It took 7 seconds. And so you think about what it is you want to accomplish. And what I'm saying is a meeting, try to have 5 of those meetings a day. Anything that moves your goal or objective forward.
Okay.
And these are 5 90-minute meetings. Those could be 5 5-minute meetings.
Okay.
And then what I ask people to do is to do 10 written correspondence. You say, oh my gosh, how do I do that? Well, and I don't mean mass emails. Here's what I do. I have, and I'll show you listeners here, I have, can you see that there?
Yeah, Joe Sweeney, can see that.
It's out a day. You say, well, who do I send them to and what do I say? I come in every morning, I read newspapers, industry magazines, and if I see, Roberto, you were just named the Business Person of the Year in Southern California, I'd cut it out, I'd attach it to this, and I'd say, Roberto, mi amigo, congratulations, Joe Sweeney. And here's what's unique about that. Nobody sends handwritten notes anymore.
Nobody.
So in the whole idea of we want to differentiate ourselves from other people, you got to say, what little thing can we do? Well, here, I'll show you this. When I wrote the New York Times bestseller, I had a lot of emails where people would kind of laugh and say congratulations. And I can't remember those. But I've saved, I'll show you. I've saved every handwritten note that people have given me. These are filled with handwritten notes. And I saved every one. And some of those afternoons that I feel kind of bad, I'll go in here and read the notes.
Therapy.
This is, it gives you a personal touch. And when people spend so much time in business trying to say, how do I differentiate? And people say that the little things mean a lot. I completely disagree. I think the little things in your business mean everything. And then lastly, I talk about making 15 phone calls a day. Yep. And I don't care, again, if it's a 5, 10, 15, or a 3, 6, 9 program, or a 1, 2, 3, whatever works for you, but have a system. Now, what the most important thing about the phone call, I think, is that when you're done, always end the call by saying, hey, Roberto, if there's anything I can do for you or your family, just let me know. Now, if you don't believe it, if you don't really want to say it, you don't really feel that, then don't say it. But if you're not in the business of serving others and helping other people get what they want, get the hell out of your business and go do something else.
That's powerful. That is powerful.
15 fun. I got to tell you, it's worked for me. And
how long have you been doing that, Joe, for?
Doing it for about 31 years. So people say, how do you know so many people? If you just do the sheer numbers, Roberto, that's 30 touch points a day. That's 620 business days a month. That's 600 a month. That's 7,200 a year, and that's 216,000 over 31 years. It's not. I haven't done the math, but I have.
That is powerful. Now, so this is. If anybody in this call, if all you do is do that, your life is changed. So really powerful. What's the second thing they can do? You talk about the board of directors. You and I had the conversation before.
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to touch base with all your listeners on is I've worked with small and medium-sized business owners my whole life. And I'm convinced probably the loneliest people in the world are small business owners. Because if you go to, Roberto, to any large corporation, they have this unique thing called a board of directors.
Yeah.
And reason for board of directors is to really help the CEO get unstuck, because all of us get stuck in our business.
Yep.
But most of our listeners, most small business people say, well, the big corporations, they need board of directors. I'm just a small, two-man shop, or I just have a couple employees. I would argue those people need boards of directors more than the big companies. And so what I would say, and I have a chapter in my book called Who's Your Wingman?
Okay.
And wingman is really people who watch out for your back. The term comes from military, and all of us need people to watch out for our back. And what's interesting, I think business and war are very similar in that it's usually the silent bullet that comes that you never see or hear that kills you and it wipes you out. And what I encourage everybody, even if you're an independent salesperson, get your own board of directors. Get your wingmen and wingwomen to watch your back. And people say, well, who would I ask to be on my board? What would I do? I would two rules. Number one, find people who know, like, and trust you, and you do the same with them. Yep. And number two, I would say try to find wingmen and wingwomen who play in areas that you find work. So, Roberto, if you were really a great coach, which you are, and a great motivator, but you were a disaster with trying to run an office and stay organized, then I'd try to find a wingman or wingwoman that could help keep you organized and keep you focused and on track. And many times your board will help supplement and actually hide some of your weaknesses.
Yes, love that.
Get a board of directors. I think it'll change your business and change your life.
One more thing they can do.
Okay, well, one thing I want to leave you with, because you talked about earlier about you had to go to the Chamber of Commerce and you didn't feel good. Let me ask you this, Roberto.
Yep.
Did you have a pit in your stomach when you did that?
Yes.
Yeah, really. So I ask everybody this. So when you have a pit in your stomach, where's the focus?
I think inward.
It's
inward.
You've got a pit in your stomach because you're focused on yourself. So I want everyone watching this to get the pad and paper out.
Okay.
Because here's what I want you to think networking. I want you to see networking more as a fisherman versus a hunter. Because most of us think in networking we've got to go hunt someone down.
Okay.
If anyone who's watching this, I'd ask you, when you hunt animals, what do? They run.
They run away. Yeah.
That's what. So people run away. So what's a great fisherman do, Roberto? They survey the pond, the water. They find out what time of day the fish are biting, on what bait. And so they go to that place in the pond, they put their pole in the water, and the fish come to them. So you say, okay, Joe, that's a great analogy. But how do I, Roberto, make this work at the Chamber of Commerce networking event? So these are the 5 words I want people to write down. When you go to your next event, pretend you're the host.
Yes.
Because think about this, Roberto. What does a host of a party do? Their number one goal is to make everyone feel good.
Yep.
They want to include everyone. So if you and I were at a networking event, I'd say, hey, Roberto, mi amigo. And if I saw someone that was either in your space or someone I wanted to connect you with, I'd say, Roberto, I want you to meet Tom Smith. Both of you, I think, are in the coaching business, or you do a lot of similar things in different industries. You two should talk to each other. And then here's what happens. There's an energy that's being sent out by you as the connector, and then people around the party pick up on that, and then people are attracted to you. You know, the big question I get is, well, if you're doing that, pretending you're the host, isn't the host of a party get angry? Complete opposite. I've hosted numerous big events in my life, and I was so thrilled anytime I brought someone that could connect other people. Because as a host, all I want are my guests and the people that come to connect and have a good time. So the 3 are the 5, 10, 15. Yep. Create your own board of directors, and then your next networking event, go in and pretend you're a fisherman, not a hunter, and pretend you're the host.
I love that. I'm going to throw one more question. We had one of our InfluenceOlogy members, Amanda Hall, ask us today, because I told her I'm going to be interviewing an expert, one of the best in the world. She said, how many networking groups should I belong to? One question. And do you have any suggestions on the best ways to find the best networking groups in your area?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's a great question, but in many ways, I would say the quality of groups is much more important than the quantity. That's number one. And number two, I think it goes back to the start of the 5, 10, 15.
Okay.
Find what your goals and objectives are, and then join those groups that can help you accomplish your goals. And here's what's interesting. A lot of times people are looking in the wrong places. I put a sidebar in my book that said, it's called Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. And what's interesting is I know a lot of single men and women, and they all say, hey, Joe, try to set me up with someone. You know a lot of people. And so, I had a woman that did this. And I said, well, what do you like to do, Michelle? And she says, oh, I love to sing in my church choir, and I love to work out and do triathlons. I said, do you belong to a church? She said, no. I said, you belong to a health club? I said, no. I said, where are you looking for guys? And she says, in the bars. Join a church, join a choir, and then join a health club. That's where you're going to find people. But it's the same thing in joining networking groups. And here's the other thing that I would say. I have a chapter about networking from scratch. It's really for people who move to new communities. How do you get connected and networked? And I tell a long story in there about my own experience, but the bottom line of all this, find out what you're passionate about and what you love to do, and then do it. For example, if I moved to San Diego, I'm a sports guy. I'd probably get tickets to the Padres, to the Chargers. I'd probably go up to LA and watch some basketball games. Why? Because I'm a sports guy. I like sports. And in that sports environment, I'm kind of in my element. Would I join the ballet? Probably not. But I'm not a ballet guy. So I'm not going to go to the ballet because I sort of feel like I'm a fish out of water. But at a sporting event, I know how to connect with people. I know how to talk to people. Not that I wouldn't at a ballet, but also find out what you're passionate about. Enjoying groups in organizations that really reflect your passion. Because, when we're always our best, when we're ourselves.
Yes.
And it's easier to be ourselves in environments that we're comfortable.
Yes. Love that. So if our audience here, or listeners, they want to keep learning, one resource for sure, your book. I'm going to put a picture here. Networking is a contact sport. New York Times best-selling authors. The one resources. Do you want to encourage 2 more resources that you think they can benefit from, Joe?
Sure. I through the last year, I met a guy by the name of Jeffrey Gittimer, who in my mind is one of the best sales trainers around. I met Jeffrey at an event. We instantly clicked. And by the end of the evening, he said, why don't you come down to Charlotte, hang out with me for a couple days. I'll show you what I do. So Jeffrey and I have become very good friends. But to me, bar none, he's the most effective, straightforward sales trainer I've ever met. And I love the guy.
Yeah, there's amazing books. Yeah.
Numerous books, anything by Jeffrey Gittimer. The other person that I've gotten very close with over the last year is Jack Canfield. He's written, all the Chicken Soup of the Soul books, and he has sold between 400 and 500 million copies. Number 1 bookseller, I think, in the world. But he's got a book out called The Success Principles. Yep. It's a very simple book. Many of your listeners, many people watching this have probably read it. But if you haven't, get it. And what's interesting, I keep it by my bedside, and many nights I'll just pull it out and just skim things. And what's funny, you read certain books at certain stages of your life and they hit you. When you read them later, you've got a different take on them.
So true.
And Jack's a personal friend, and so I keep the Bible and Jack Canfield's book next to my bedside.
I love it. Now, I know since we work, you've been doing like some crazy amount speaking. By the way, the speaking that Joe does is like the corporations write like a very nice check, and he delivers amazing value. Can you tell me a little bit about your speaking? Who is your audience? What kind of information you can provide them to grow their businesses?
Yeah, well, what I really try to do, and I've probably given, with your help, I've given roughly 85 talks the last year and a half, year and a quarter. But I speak to a lot of businesses that have sales organizations. I've spoken to a lot of insurance companies, a lot of financial companies. I've done quite a few talks for Wells Fargo. I've done 8 or 9 talks for Wells Fargo Wealth Management around the country. Done several talks for General Electric, Northwestern Mutual, but I've done a lot of talks for regional companies with large sales groups. Okay. really try to do in the speaking are four things. I get people to try to reframe what networking's about. We talked about it here today. I get into detail about the four steps. The second thing I do, the four action steps that you do, the process.
Yep.
The third thing I talk about successful companies who have implemented this program. And then lastly, and most importantly, what about you and your business? How do you take these tools and concepts and instantly apply them to your business? And again, the whole idea is to help people get better connected, to grow their business, increase their influence, or even land their next job. There's 23.5 million unemployed or underemployed people in this country. And the claim that I've made, Roberto, since the start of the book is if you read the book and do our workbook and you practice the 5, 10, 15 principle for 80 business days, 80, and you don't have a job offer, pick up the phone and call me. I'll give you all your money back and I'll write you a personal check for $250.
Wow.
Now, if you multiply 22 million times $250, that's over $5 billion. So I got to be damn confident that this.
I love that. I love it. So if an organization, any CEO, manager, leader wants to hire for speaking, what's the best address to contact you? I'm going to put here in the video.
Networking is contact sport, and you can contact us and just send a request, and our office will get back to you.
Awesome. Can you repeat again the website, Joe?
Networking is a contact sport.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Any other message for InfluenceOlogy?
No, but if there's anything that I can do for you, you know, time, day or night, you know I'd do anything for you.
I appreciate you, man, from my heart. InfluenceOlogy, Jeff, my business partner, and I, we were very thankful and grateful to have you in our community. Thanks, my brother. I appreciate you. Thanks so much.